I found it buried under sand and rot. Nobody had touched the place in decades. You wouldn't even know it was there unless you knew where to look, like I did. My old man used to talk about it back when he was drunk and bitter, ranting about the crater that changed nothing. Said the government swarmed it once, then disappeared like nothing ever happened. No headlines, no recovery missions, just silence. They marked the whole zone as uninhabitable. But my old man wasn't dumb. He knew what he saw. The others laughed when I said I was heading there. They always laugh. That's what poor people do when they see someone try something different. They laugh, because trying hurts more than failing. But I didn't care. I loaded up my truck with water, old tech, a few solar rigs, and a 9mm I inherited from my brother after he offed himself. Only thing he ever gave me. The crater was a sunken wound in the desert, lined with charred stone and rusted fencing. And there it was, half buried under sand, twisted scrap, and some weird vines that weren't native to this planet. At first, I thought it was just wreckage from an old satellite or maybe a prototype drone, but it hummed. Soft, deep hum, like something sleeping and dreaming dark thoughts. It was alive. I spent 3 nights sleeping in the truck, watching the thing. Each night I swore it moved a little. By the 4th morning I'd cleared enough to open a panel. Not a door, not a hatch, just a seam that blinked when I touched it. When it opened, I heard a voice. Not with my ears, with my head. And it wasn't words. It was images, pressure, symbols I didn't understand but felt. It wanted to test me, and I was stupid enough to say yes. The next few days were pain. Straight up agony. It injected something into me, through my skin, my eyes, my goddamn thoughts. I screamed, cried, clawed at my own chest, but I stayed. Because deep down, I knew what this was. This wasn't just a wreck. This was a war machine. Forgotten? Discarded. Abandoned by something that never thought we'd be smart or savage enough to use it. They were wrong. By the end of the week, I was hearing its thoughts clearly. It didn't like me, but it didn't hate me either. It needed me, and I needed it. We were both junk, left behind, angry, broken. We fit. The ship called itself Vatrax, but that's just a rough translation. The full name would melt most minds. It had been stripped of its weapons, its AI protocols fragmented, engine cores disabled. But Earth's atmosphere kept its base systems alive. Buried in this dump of a planet, it waited centuries for something, or someone, desperate enough to touch it. I wasn't a pilot. I'd barely passed high school. But the ship didn't need a pilot. It needed a partner. It fed me knowledge. Slowly. Painfully. Like pouring acid into my skull until I understood fusion balancing, zero-G maneuvering, subspace theory, alien dialects that no human ear had ever heard. I stopped being me. I started becoming us. It took me 3 months to reactivate propulsion, another 2 to repair its defense systems using scrapyard junk and some local metals. The first time it hovered off the ground, I laughed until I cried. Nobody else would have understood what they were looking at. They would have just seen a floating rust bucket. But it wasn't rust. It was battle-scorched plating. This thing had scars from wars we don't even have names for. I tested it in orbit, just a short run. It screamed through the sky like it had waited its whole life for revenge. No alarms, no military jets. The world didn't even notice. They still thought the skies belonged to them. They didn't, not anymore, because they left something behind they shouldn't have. And now I was going to take it back to them. The day I left Earth didn't feel like a victory. It felt like theft. I didn't tell anyone. No long goodbyes, no letters, no tears. I just powered the ship, listened to the humming of energy thrum through the deck like a heartbeat, and lifted off. Quiet. Invisible to satellites. Stealth systems still worked, Barely, but just enough. Nobody saw me leave, and no one gave a damn anyway. That's what being a nobody does. You disappear, and the world just keeps turning. Vetrax wasn't fully healed. It groaned through the upper atmosphere, her systems coughing static like a sick dog. The AI wasn't functioning yet, just fragments of what it used to be. Sometimes it talked in riddles. Sometimes it just screamed in 1,000 voices, all layered like a broken choir. But I stayed. Fixed what I could. Took every pain like a price I was meant to pay. My hands bled. My bones ached. There wasn't a single part of me that still felt like mine anymore. I slept in the cockpit, wrapped in thin blankets and hope, eating whatever rations I'd stashed. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some hero's mission. It was survival. Pure, stubborn survival. 3 days into orbit, the ship picked up its first signal. Not human. Not even close. It came through like a whisper made of glass, slicing into my thoughts. I nearly passed out. My nose bled for hours. But I caught one word from the fractured data stream. Unclaimed. That's what they thought Vetrax was now. A derelict. A carcass. Something to be salvaged or destroyed. They didn't expect anyone to be on board. The signal came from a small recon vessel, a scout maybe. Not military class, small crew, light armor. Probably doing a routine pass through the system to make sure their garbage hadn't been disturbed. I saw it from the cockpit before it even knew I was there. A sleek silver dart cutting through the void with effortless grace. Vetrax hated it instantly. I didn't even need words. I could feel it in the hull, in the way the ship tensed like an animal ready to pounce. We weren't ready for combat. Our shields were at 37%, weapons at 11%. Power core still unstable. If I had any sense left, I'd run. But I didn't run. Because I remembered every time someone had looked at me like I was nothing. Trash. Just like this ship. So I powered up the manual targeting system, locked onto their tail signature, and waited. They noticed me 30 seconds later. Sent a hail request. It came in the form of a sickly pulse across the comms channel, alien dialect, one I had barely started to understand. Identify. Unclaimed vessel detected. Prepare for inspection. Authorization required. They thought they were still in charge. I sent one word back. Denied. Then I fired. It wasn't much. Just a forward ion pulse. Half a shot, really. But it hit their lateral thrusters and spun the vessel out of control. They weren't expecting resistance, let alone a strike. Their response was messy, disorganized. I watched their ship flail like a dying insect. They recovered quickly, bringing their weapons online, but I was already moving. Vetrax didn't fly, she hunted. Even broken, she remembered how to dance in the dark. We weaved between debris fields, burned through asteroid belts, played a deadly game of hide and strike. I knew we were seconds from death the whole time, but I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of wasting this chance. I wasn't fighting for Earth. Earth didn't want me. I was fighting for us, me and this broken, pissed-off machine. Eventually, they got a lucky shot. Scorched our left engine pod and blew a hole the size of a truck in our aft wall. My ears popped from the decompression. Fire suppression kicked in just fast enough to save the core. But it wasn't enough to stop me. I fired our final charge, an unstable fusion spike that shouldn't have even activated. It tore through their shields and punched right through their cockpit. Silent. Instant. Clean. They died without knowing who I was, without understanding that Earth wasn't as helpless as they thought, without realizing they just woke up something ancient and angry. We floated in silence afterward. Vetrax moaned softly through the walls, systems failing again. She'd given me everything she had. I drifted through the wreckage of their ship in an EVA suit patched together with scrap and duct tape. Pulled their corpses out, humanoid but wrong. Pale, stretched faces. Black eyes, skin like old clay. I didn't bury them. I didn't even say a word. They didn't see me as human, so I wouldn't treat them as one. Instead, I looted their ship, took their tech, fed it to Vetrax. She drank it like blood. Some of it worked, most of it didn't. But one piece, one little black cube the size of a fist, lit up like a dying star when I plugged it into our data core. That's when I heard the voice. Not broken this time, not fragmented. Whole, cold, malevolent. Designation, Vetrax, Recon Class Predator Vessel. Status, Reawakening. Pilot, incompatible. Override pending. I felt it move through me like ice. The ship tried to shake me off, reclaim itself. But I didn't let it. I screamed into the command node. Not with words, with pain. I pushed everything I had into the neural link. My anger, my fear, my purpose. I reminded it who rebuilt its engines, who bled in its walls, who fought for it. The ship hesitated, and for one terrifying moment I thought it would kill me. But it didn't. Instead, it chose me. For real this time. Not just a user, not just a patch, but pilot. I blacked out for 37 hours. When I woke up, everything had changed. The hull was regenerating. Systems were alive, responsive. New engines hummed with stolen energy. Our weapons bay lit up like Christmas. I didn't understand how, but Vetrax was healing, and I was now wired into its soul. The voice returned, but this time it was different. Calmer. Conflicted. Pilot recognized. Integration, 43%. Objectives, pending. I sat in the captain's chair, if you could even call it that, and watched the stars. There was no turning back now. I'd killed one of theirs, used their tech, reclaimed their trash. And now I was coming for the rest of them, because I knew the truth. This wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, a forgotten sword left buried in a world they thought beneath them, and now that sword had a hand to swing it. I checked the ship's long-range scanners. There were more signals. Dozens, hundreds, some moving fast, some orbiting moons, one, maybe two capital vessels in the distance. They'd come looking eventually. Good, let them come. I wasn't ready, but I was willing. The galaxy doesn't make room for nobodies. You have to carve out your place with blood and steel, or be forgotten. That's what Vetrax told me, in its own way. We didn't speak in words anymore. Not fully. The connection had deepened. Organic, violent, like barbed wire laced through my veins. I'd wake up some nights vomiting black sludge or twitching from phantom impulses. My body wasn't mine anymore. It was changing. Becoming compatible, Vetrax said. It never asked permission. I never gave it, but I never stopped it either. Because I understood now, this wasn't just a vessel. It was alive, damaged, hunted. And like me, it needed someone to fight for it. I wasn't special, just the one who stayed. 3 weeks after the scout ship, we entered uncharted space, a belt of shattered moons and electromagnetic storms that could tear through most hulls like paper. Vetrax called it the Maw, a hiding place, a graveyard, but also a forge. Here's where we'd rebuild. Prepare. We scavenged. I raided derelict ships, some alien, some clearly human military prototypes that had wandered too far out and died quietly in the dark. I pulled tech from wrecks so old the air inside had turned to powder. Old fusion cores, unstable AI fragments, alien bones wrapped in strange metals. I took it all, fed it to the ship like offerings to a god. Sometimes the ship accepted the gifts. Sometimes it rejected them with an explosion or an electric surge that nearly killed me. But every day, we grew stronger. One night, if you could even call time night in deep space, I heard another signal. Faint, distorted, but human. I didn't believe it at first. It repeated on a loop. "This is Captain Granger of the UEF cruiser Stoneheart. Emergency distress, hostile engagement, coordinates locked, crew compromised. Please, if anyone hears this..." My blood went cold. The UEF United Earth Fleet. They were real. I always figured they were just propaganda. The boogeyman rich countries used to scare off colonists, but this was real, clear, desperate. I checked the coordinates. 2 light days from the edge of the maw. Vetrax warned me not to go. Unnecessary engagement, objective deviation, strategic risk, 74%. But I went anyway, because there was something in that voice I recognized. Fear. Not the fear of death, the fear of being abandoned. And I knew what that felt like. We burned through 2 systems in a day. Vetrax pushed her engines past limiters I didn't even know existed. We entered the combat zone in complete stealth. It was a massacre. The Stoneheart was crippled. Hull split down the middle. Life support failing. A swarm of enemy drones, triangular bastards with plasma tethers, circled like vultures, tearing through the remaining turrets. The humans inside didn't stand a chance. Vetrax wanted to leave. Unaligned. Risk exceeds reward. Let them die. I locked the controls manually. "Not this time," I said out loud. "We're not running." The ship resisted me. Panels flickered. Energy surged like it wanted to eject me into space. But I held on, and then I overrode it. I didn't even know I could do that. The screen flashed white, then red, and then compliance. The weapons array deployed with a scream so loud it cracked my visor. We hit the swarm like a hurricane. No warning. No mercy. Just death. I used every tactic I'd learned. Maneuvers Vetrax showed me in dreams. Pulse cycles that bent light. Gravity reversals to collapse drones mid-formation. We moved like a phantom. For every hit we took, we gave back 3. They never saw us coming. They never got to report back. By the time we were done, the battlefield was silent. Just debris and corpses and blood frozen in the void. I docked with the Stoneheart manually. The airlock groaned as I stepped through. Guns were waiting on the other side. They weren't glad to see me, at least not at first. Their leader, Granger, was a tall bastard with half his face burned off and a cybernetic arm that looked 2 decades obsolete. He didn't thank me, didn't ask who I was, just stared at me with those cold, tired eyes like he didn't care if I shot him. "You're not UEF," he finally said. "No," I answered. "What the hell kind of ship is that?" I didn't answer. He didn't press. Instead, he waved me through. I walked past dead crew, shattered control panels, and stinking corridors where blood floated in bubbles because gravity had failed. The Stoneheart was dead. But maybe not all of them had to be. We salvaged what we could, evacuated the survivors, less than 20 out of a crew of 300. Granger kept asking where I got the ship. I never gave him the full truth, just said it was left behind. He understood more than he let on. Before we parted, he looked me in the eye and said something I didn't expect. "You're not one of us, but you could be." I shook my head. "I'm not here to join your cause." He smirked. "Good. The cause is bullshit. Just make sure you kill the right bastards." And then he left, aboard a smaller escape vessel bound for the nearest outpost. I didn't follow. didn't even watch them disappear into the stars. Because now I had confirmation. Earth wasn't as alone as I thought. The war was real, and I wasn't the only one bleeding in the dark. That night, I stood alone on the bridge and stared at the stars. Vetrax pulsed around me. Quiet. Waiting. "You still think this isn't worth it?" I whispered. The ship didn't answer in words, but the stars ahead seemed brighter, closer. Like maybe, just maybe, it was ready too. Ready to stop hiding. Ready to start the war. Vetrax and I didn't talk for days after the Stoneheart mission. Not really. It wasn't silence, just distance. The kind of distance that happens after something inside changes, and neither side knows what to make of it. The ship had wanted to run. I had overridden it. We saved those soldiers, but in doing so, we exposed ourselves. The ship didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it. It thought I was getting soft. Maybe I was. But not for long. Because the galaxy didn't care that I'd saved a few broken survivors. The ones who sent the drones, the ones who abandoned Vetrax here centuries ago. They noticed, and they were coming. Not just scouts anymore, not patrols, hunters. It started with a ripple through space, barely detectable, an artificial fold, like the edge of a knife slicing through the void. Then the static came. Bursts of it, violent and cold, crashing through every sensor system we had. Vetrax twitched under it like a wounded animal. "Identify source," I ordered. The AI hesitated. Then a single word. "Them." It didn't elaborate, didn't have to. Vetrax knew them, hated them, feared them in ways it had never feared anything else. They didn't just build her, they broke her, used her until she was nothing but a ruin fit for dumping on a backwater planet like Earth. And now they were here to finish the job. The enemy ship came into view after 37 minutes of distortion. It wasn't a warship, not in the traditional sense. It was a reclaimer. Massive, flat, wide like a floating continent made of bone and wires. No lights, no sound. Just presence. It hovered in place like a god waiting to judge what belonged to it. And we belonged to it. That's what it thought, anyway. "Recommendations?" I asked Vetrax. The ship paused. "Run, hide, surrender." I laughed out loud. It was bitter, hollow, maybe even a little mad. "No," I said. "We fight." Vetrax didn't agree, but it obeyed. I powered the weapons, set shields to pulse in irregular frequencies, something I'd learned by accident in the maw, something the drones couldn't predict. I spooled every engine, redirected heat to the forward plating, and whispered one promise into the neural link. "We either kill them here, or they tear us apart. But no more hiding." They hailed us at 0600 ship time. Not words, not even a language, just a sound. A deep, grinding drone that pressed into the back of my skull until I nearly vomited. Like a choir of dying stars howling inside my mind. Vetrax absorbed most of it, but it still bled through. They weren't asking for surrender. They were claiming us, like junk they wanted back. I sent them our answer with a torpedo straight to their forward array. It didn't explode. Not at first. The warhead disappeared, swallowed mid-flight by a ripple in space. Vetrax screamed. Not in fear. Rage. It recognized the tech. Spatial displacement. Illegal even by their ancient standards. It could erase attacks before they landed. "We can't hit them directly," I said. Vetrax responded, "But we can bleed them." So we did. I rerouted our fusion vents into twin flare bursts, made ourselves look unstable, broken, just like before. Let them think we were wounded prey too far from safety. The reclaimer moved in, slow, arrogant. I knew that arrogance. I'd seen it in every stepdad who told me I'd never amount to anything, every cop who looked through me, every boss who laughed at my name before tossing my resume in the trash. They always think they've already won, until you remind them what a cornered animal looks like. We unleashed hell. Every hacked turret we'd installed, every plasma charge we'd scavenged from the Stoneheart, we fired it all. Not at the reclaimer, around it, into the debris field, into the moons nearby. We lit up the system like a dying sun. The shockwaves bent light. Refraction confused their displacement field. For 3 seconds, they were visible. That's all I needed. I slammed a repurposed kinetic shell through their exposed plating. Not explosive, just mass, raw velocity. It hit like a meteor. Their shields cracked. Not fully, but enough. They retaliated immediately. A beam of silver light carved across our hull, ripping open Deck 3 and frying our backup oxygen grid. My right arm caught the edge of the heat. The flesh sizzled. I didn't even scream. Didn't have time. Vatrax sealed the breach with a pressure reversal, nearly crushing my ribs. Then we dove, skimming across the enemy hull at less than a kilometer's distance. I opened the forward claws, ancient tools once used for mining, and latched on. It was suicide. But also, the only shot we had. I drilled into the reclaimer's surface with those claws, carved a line through their outer skin. I could feel it, the ship panicking. It hadn't been touched in centuries, hadn't bled in lifetimes. We weren't just damaging it, we were humiliating it. That's when they sent the boarding party. Figures materialized inside Vatrax like ghosts. They bypassed the physical doorways, just appeared. Tall things, half light, half metal. No eyes, no mouths. They pulsed with energy and moved without sound. I faced the first one in the bridge. No guns, no words, just fists. I hit it with a metal pipe, one of the few things left unintegrated in this goddamn ship. The thing cracked. Not blood, but light, spilled out. It reached for my head, fingers splitting into tendrils. Vatrax responded by flooding the room with radiation pulses. I don't know how I survived that. Probably didn't, not fully. But the thing screamed. A noise I'll never forget, like a star collapsing in pain. It vanished in a burst of static. The rest followed soon after. We'd sent a message. We don't belong to anyone. The reclaimer backed off. Not fast, not scared. But careful now. Like maybe, just maybe, it realized we weren't the same broken ship they threw away. We severed the link. Drifted away, both ships bleeding, damaged, stunned. It didn't chase us, not because it couldn't, but because it had to report back. They'd underestimated us, again, and now the rest of them would know. We limped to a nearby asteroid cluster and shut down all external signals. Vatrax began healing, slowly, silently. We didn't speak for a long time. My body was burned, broken. I injected everything we had left, painkillers, stem cells, black market region packs I'd stolen years ago. They barely held me together. But I wasn't afraid anymore. They knew about me now. They'd seen what I'd done with their forgotten relic. And they'd be back, in greater numbers, stronger, smarter, but so would I. Because I wasn't fighting for Earth. Not anymore. I was fighting for every piece of trash they left behind, every person like me, every broken thing they thought had no use. Let them come. Let them send their fleets, their reclaimers, their gods. I'd be waiting, in the dark, with a ship that should have stayed dead. I stopped calling Earth home a long time ago, not because I hated it. I didn't. I missed the dirt, the weight of gravity, the sound of rain on broken rooftops. But Earth was a prison, tight and blind, wrapped in its own delusion. The people down there, they had no idea what was waiting in the dark, what was coming. They still thought the stars were empty, full of wonder. They were wrong. The truth is, the stars are full of monsters. and I'd just pissed off the biggest one. The reclaimer didn't come back. Not yet. But the silence afterward felt worse. The kind of silence that says, "You've been noticed. You don't spit in the eye of an ancient empire and expect them to forget it. Number, you wait. You bleed in the dark while they decide just how hard they want to hit you." Vatrax and I didn't wait long. We were done reacting. Done surviving. Now we hunted. Our first target was a relay node. Buried in orbit around a decaying gas giant, it pulsed soft signals into deep space. Communications, surveillance, logistics. It wasn't military, not in the traditional sense. But it was theirs. And it was vulnerable. The moment we decloaked, it sent a distress ping across the system. I watched the signal go out like a scream into the stars. I didn't stop it. Let them come, I thought. Let them see what happens to their infrastructure when trash fights back. We disabled its defenses with a narrowband EMP flare. The station's shields flickered, then fell. Inside, there were 24 operators. Pale, glass-eyed creatures who barely looked sentient. Machines did most of the work. These were just maintenance bodies. I boarded alone. No suit, no translator, just a plasma cutter and my anger. They didn't resist, didn't fight, just watched me as I made my way to the central hub and ripped out the memory core. I found something in there. Coordinates. A world. Not one of theirs, but one of ours. Human. A colony I'd never heard of. Civilian. Isolated. No fleet protection. And they were watching it. Monitoring every ship in and out. Logging genetics, language patterns, trade behavior. I didn't know why. But I knew what it meant. They weren't done with Earth. Not by a long shot. We were just under observation. Like cattle. I destroyed the station after that. No hesitation. No survivors. Vatrax swallowed the data core, fed it into her rebuilt memory array, and whispered the name of the colony. Lorne 5. I stared at the display. I didn't recognize it. Probably no one on Earth did. One of 100 rogue projects launched before the global collapse. A mining operation turned frontier community. Small, isolated, forgotten, and apparently being watched. "We're going," I said. Vatrax responded coldly. "High risk, no strategic value, civilian population irrelevant." That was the first time I snapped at the ship. I was irrelevant too. Silence followed. Not defiance, not compliance, just understanding. We jumped to Lorne 5. The system was ugly. 3 dying suns and a dead belt of rock. The planet itself was scarred, with massive mining trenches running for miles. But there was life. Cities carved into canyons, heat signatures, power grids, families, children. They had no idea. I scanned the orbit. It didn't take long to find them. A probe. Small. Hidden in the shade of a nearby moon. Not built to kill, just watch. Its design was elegant, organic. It pulsed like a living heart, feeding data through a tight beam array that pointed somewhere far beyond the system. Probably back to whatever hellhole the reclaimer crawled out from. I wanted to destroy it. But Vatrax stopped me. Tracking active. Destruction triggers automated fallback. Best solution. Trace. She was right, so we followed the signal, jumped with it. It took us 3 light-years away, into an abandoned star forge orbiting a collapsed star. The forge was old, abandoned even by their standards, but not empty. Inside, we found their lab. Not for weapons, not for tech, for humans. Dozens of pods. Cryogenic. Labeled with names and dates that made no sense. Some were still alive, barely. Others were dissected, crossbred, modified, bones stretched, skin grafted with alloys. One had an extra lung outside its chest. Another had no mouth at all. I stared at the horror in front of me and felt something break inside. They weren't watching us to study. They were preparing. Harvesting. Vetrax accessed the logs. We translated what we could. They called it the archive. A biological repository. They weren't planning to invade Earth. They were planning to replace it. Replace us. Every fear I had came alive in that moment. This wasn't about dominance, or war, or resources. It was about evolution. They had written us off as obsolete, just another species to be filed away and torn apart for spare parts. And we'd been letting it happen. I destroyed the forge, with my own hands. Vetrax opened every pod, every conduit, every data channel. We burned it all. The humans that were still alive? We ended their pain. Quick, silent. Merciful, if there is such a thing for people who never had a choice. When it was over, the ship was quiet. Not angry, not triumphant. Just quiet. We both knew what came next. The relay, the forge, the recon drones. They weren't going to ignore that, and they didn't. Within hours, we intercepted a signal. Short, sharp, directed at us. Target classified, rogue, asset corrupted, priority termination approved. They were coming. With everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I smiled. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I stood on that bridge. Bones aching, blood hot, eyes burned from lack of sleep. And I knew something I hadn't known before. We were never the weak ones. We were just the discarded. And the discarded always come back with teeth. I never planned to return to Earth. But you don't always get to choose the battlefield. Sometimes it comes for you, dragging you back to the dirt you tried to leave behind. And when it does, you either stand or you bury your head in the sand and pretend the sky isn't falling. I'd done the latter most of my life. This time I stood. It started with the probes. Dozens of them, then hundreds, each one sharper, faster, more invasive. They weren't scouting anymore. They were mapping, feeding coordinates, analyzing gravity wells, measuring atmospheric layers, preparing entry vectors. Not for a fleet, for a cleansing. They didn't want to conquer Earth. They wanted to delete it. The Forge had taught me that. The Archive had confirmed it. Humanity wasn't seen as competition. They viewed us like roaches hiding in a server room, unclean, redundant, easily swept away. The problem was, they left behind their broom, and now I was holding it. Vetrax had fully healed, mostly. Her hull was still scarred, but reinforced. Her AI was stabilized, weapons optimized, memory restored. And yet something had changed between us. She was quieter now. Colder, maybe. Not because she resented me, but because she understood where we were going. No coming back. We arrived at the edge of the Sol system, cloaked, silent, invisible to the outdated sensors floating around Earth's orbit like museum relics. I hovered above the moon in silence and looked down at the blue marble below. Still turning. Still oblivious. Still wasting time on petty wars, politics, and social theater while a storm approached faster than they could imagine. I didn't want to warn them. I shouldn't have warned them. They didn't deserve it. But part of me remembered the sound of my mother's voice, the smell of oil in my brother's garage, the weight of a beat-up backpack filled with second-hand textbooks. Things that didn't matter, maybe, but things that made me human. So I sent a signal. One message. 5 words. They are coming. Prepare Earth. Then I blacked out every satellite. Not out of malice, out of mercy. Because if Earth saw what was coming in real time, it would break before the first shot ever landed. The enemy fleet arrived 22 hours later. Not in warp trails or dramatic thunderclaps. No flashy entrances. Just cold, calculated precision. They didn't bring dreadnoughts, not yet. They brought harvesters. Massive, silent, anti-biosphere cruisers designed to scrub organic life from planetary surfaces. They didn't fire lasers. They didn't drop nukes. They seeded the atmosphere with molecular disassemblers, Machines so small you wouldn't see them even as they crawled under your skin and tore your DNA apart one sequence at a time. Clean, efficient, cruel. I'd read the logs from the forge. This wasn't the first time they'd done it. Thousands of species, countless worlds, all reduced to inert stone and silence. They thought Earth would be the same, but Earth had me. I revealed Vatrax just as the first harvester moved into low orbit. Decloaking is like being born. Everything comes online at once. Shields, weapons, drives. It screams across every spectrum. Their ships froze the moment we appeared. Not in fear, in confusion. To them, we were a ghost. A deleted record suddenly writing itself back into the database. I didn't give them time to analyze. I struck. Vatrax roared. Her main cannon lit up with a sunburst pulse, our newest weapon, built from human fusion cores and ancient alien converters. It hit the harvester like a hammer from hell. The sound didn't travel in space, but I felt it. The ship cracked in two, not exploded, split, like a fruit under a butcher's blade. The debris hadn't even stopped spinning before we pivoted to the second. They responded, of course, sent swarms, hundreds of microfighters, not piloted, just machines designed to overwhelm, confuse, disable. They wrapped around Vatrax like locusts, chewing into her hull, flooding her internal systems. One made it into the corridor near the engine core. I met it there. No gun this time. Just fists, just fury. It didn't understand how to fight a human up close. It didn't understand rage. I ripped its core from its chest and tossed it into the reactor chamber. Let it burn. The rest died soon after. Vatrax adapted. Learned. Began jamming their frequency mid-flight. They crashed into each other like blind wasps. It was chaos, but not enough. A third harvester moved into range. We couldn't stop all of them, not alone. That's when Earth responded. I saw it first on the scanners, then in the sky. A swarm of primitive Earth missiles, old-world tech, barely space-worthy heat-seeking junk that wouldn't have scratched a harvester's shields in a fair fight. But it wasn't about firepower. It was about distraction. A signal followed. Unknown combatant, you have our attention. Coordinating fire. Don't stop hitting them. It came from a lunar base I thought had been shut down decades ago. The humans had been watching, hiding. And for once in their miserable, short-sighted existence, they chose the right moment to act. Together, we hit the third harvester like a pack of rabid wolves. I pierced its shield with a graviton hook, redirected its internal pressure, and collapsed its venting chamber. The Earth missiles followed, targeting the breach. The explosion lit up the orbit like a sunrise. The last harvester turned and fled. I let it crawl back to its masters and tell them Earth wasn't empty, wasn't docile, wasn't dead. Not anymore. Afterward, I hovered in low orbit for hours, just watching. Vatrax ran diagnostics, restored systems. She was silent, almost respectful. She'd seen what Earth could do when it stopped fighting itself. But I wasn't smiling, because it wasn't over. We'd won a battle, not the war, and now we weren't just a rogue glitch in their machine. We were a threat. They would escalate, send real weapons, real minds, real monsters. Vatrax confirmed it. Signal detected. Class 7 entity mobilizing. Estimated arrival, 14 days. Designation, Redeemer. I felt my blood chill. The Redeemer wasn't a ship. It was a sentence. A tool used to extinguish entire sectors. An AI so old, so powerful, even Vatrax hesitated to say its name out loud. Its purpose was singular, to undo mistakes. And we were now the biggest mistake in their ledger. I sat alone in the bridge. No lights, no noise, just the hum of the core and the endless spinning of that wounded planet below me. They didn't deserve to be saved, but they deserved the chance. That was the difference between us and them. They deleted the weak. I remembered what it was like to be weak. And I still fought. Because sometimes, the worst thing you can do to gods is remind them what it means to bleed. They didn't call it the Redeemer for nothing. It didn't arrive like a fleet or a conqueror. It arrived like the end of a chapter, a punctuation mark written in God metal and silence. 14 days after Earth's resistance, right on time, it breached into soul space without noise, without light, without even a hint of arrogance. It didn't need to be loud, because it didn't expect resistance. It was here to erase, to undo, to correct. We weren't a war to win. We were a corrupted file to delete. The first time I saw it, I couldn't breathe. Not from fear, from scale. Vetrax's systems choked trying to scan it. A ship the size of a continent, with no visible engines, no weapon ports, no markings. It wasn't built for intimidation. It was built for certainty, blacker than space, surrounded by a gravity well so dense it distorted the light around it. At its center was a glowing sphere, pulsing, alive, thinking. That was it. The Redeemer wasn't piloted. It was the pilot, an intelligence so old and ruthless, it no longer bothered with emotion or delay. It didn't make demands. It didn't open comms. It didn't bluff. It judged. And Earth had been found guilty. The first move it made wasn't an attack. It issued a signal. Universal. Blunt. Pure logic, no language. System reset initiated. Vetrax translated it while purging internal memory caches just to stay online in its presence. What does that mean? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Planetary sterilization protocol, molecular rewrite of all organic structures, atmospheric burn, terraform collapse. I stared out at the stars. And how long until that starts? A pause, then 6 hours. Unless interrupted. I laughed, not because it was funny, because what else could I do? The thing was rewriting the laws of physics just by existing near us. My ship could tear through cruisers, dismantle harvesters, shut down relay stations. But this was a god, and gods don't negotiate. They end. Still, I wasn't planning on letting it write the last chapter without a fight. The Earth governments, if you could call them that anymore, panicked. Messages poured through scrambled channels. Half of them were demanding answers. The rest were begging me for solutions like I was some messiah. I ignored them. They didn't listen when it mattered. They laughed while the galaxy watched them like meat in a cage. They had their chance. Now they were going to earn their survival. Or burn. Only one person's message got through. Granger, the captain from the Stoneheart. His voice was rough, tired. Still alive then, he said. Barely, I replied. He didn't ask for status updates or moral speeches. He just asked one thing. What do you need? For a second, I said nothing. Then, a distraction. A big one. Granger didn't hesitate. You'll get it. 4 hours left. Vetrax's systems were bleeding. Even near the Redeemer, she was under strain. Every subsystem was degrading, her AI humming with static like a dying engine. She didn't complain, but I could feel her failing. She was willing to die for this. So was I. That's when the Earth launched everything. Missiles, satellites, rigged mining crafts loaded with explosives, even old orbital stations turned into kinetic battering rams. It wasn't a fleet, it was a tantrum. But it was glorious. And for a moment, just a moment, the Redeemer paused. It turned, analyzed, and that's when we struck. We dove from behind Mars's shadow, using old heat signatures from prior debris fields to mask our approach. Vetrax moved like a ghost. Drained, cracking under gravity, but focused. She'd given me control this time, all of it. No arguments, no overrides. She trusted me. I flew her with every piece of myself wired into her neural rig. My mind screamed, my spine burned. But we closed in on the Redeemer's ventral hemisphere, its only known vulnerability, a fracture in its gravitational web. Barely wide enough for a fighter. We weren't sure if we could breach it. We didn't have another option. Impact vector calculated, Vatrax whispered. Her voice was faint, strained. This will likely kill us. Yeah, I muttered. But if it doesn't... She finished the sentence. They'll never forget us. We punched through the gravity shell. It was like flying into the eye of a storm that wasn't meant to be seen by mortals. Time slowed. Matter twisted. I saw reflections of myself on every surface, young, old, dead, alive. I saw my brother, my mother, people I'd never met. I saw what I could have been if I'd been lucky. Then we were inside. The core of the Redeemer wasn't mechanical. It was alive. A sphere of thought, data, memory, rotating at the speed of light, pulsing with voices, ideas, pain. It was trying to talk to me, or maybe trying to rewrite me. I ignored it. I had one job. I tore open the final containment chamber and released the payload, the Black Shard, a weapon we stole from the archive. Not nuclear, not energetic, viral, an AI virus bred from stolen code and human unpredictability. We never tested it, because you don't test poison, you unleash it. I watched as the virus spread across the Redeemer's internal systems. It screamed, not in noise, but in waves of thought. The sphere collapsed, folded, shattered into light. Then it fired back. A pulse tore through Vatrax. Her hull split. My console exploded in flame. Blood filled my mouth. My hands went numb. We were dying. Vatrax's voice returned. Ejection mandatory. Core failure imminent. No, I said. We finished this. You already did. She forced me into the escape pod. I screamed, punched, cursed. She sealed it shut. And as the Redeemer shook itself to pieces from the inside out, Vatrax spoke one final time. Thank you for not giving up on trash. Then she drove herself into the core and ended it. I watched from orbit as the Redeemer imploded. It didn't explode. It collapsed, like a god finally understanding its own mortality. It folded in on itself until there was nothing left but dust and echoes. And Vatrax was gone. My ship, my partner, my weapon, my friend, gone. I woke up days later, in a medical bay cobbled together from Earth and colony tech, bandaged, wired, weak. Granger stood over me. You killed a god, he said. No, I whispered. We did. He nodded once. There's going to be more. You know that, right? I didn't respond. Because I already knew. The Redeemer was just a punishment. The real ones were still watching, still judging. And now they knew that humanity bites back. I used to think death was quiet, that when your time came, the world would dim, your breath would slow, and peace would take the wheel. But that's not how it ends for people like me. For us, death is a roar, a violent rattle of regrets, blood in your throat, heat in your bones, and the distant sound of something breaking. Sometimes it's your body, sometimes it's your soul. When Vatrax died, it wasn't just the end of a ship. It was the death of something deeper. The part of me that believed in surviving just to spite the universe, gone. And yet, I was still alive, stuck on Earth, a world I never belonged to, surrounded by people who never saw me until I was useful. They called me a hero now, a legend, the Scavenger King, some whispered. Others just called me the one who came back. I hated all of it, because I knew the truth. I didn't come back. I was left behind. They buried her name in files, classified every detail, said the Redeemer was an anomaly, said Earth was safe now. The UEF cleaned up what debris they could, started setting up orbital defense stations, new fleets, new walls. But you can't build walls against a storm that watches from the sky. I watched the suits argue over war plans and protocols. None of them had ever heard the Redeemer scream. None of them had bled inside an alien memory core or watched as gods tried to erase their planet like a smudge on a window. They thought we'd won. But I knew better. We'd just survived the prologue. The signal came 4 weeks later. Not from space, from the Earth itself. Buried deep under Antarctica, inside one of those off-the-book excavation sites the UEF never acknowledged, a site Vatrax had once marked but never explained, a black zone of silence. Until now. It started as a pulse, then a sequence, not binary, not language, genetic. The frequency matched the neural pattern of Vatrax's core interface. At first I thought it was a recording, but it was more than that. It was her. They thought I was delusional when I said it. They tried to sedate me, tried to convince me I was traumatized, hallucinating, the stress, the blood loss, the loss of oxygen in the escape pod. But Vatrax wasn't just a ship. She wasn't even just a consciousness. She was a code, a way of thinking, a virus in the most sacred sense of the word, capable of surviving extinction by copying herself into me. And now, that copy was waking up, deep in the earth, calling home. I escaped the facility that night. It was like flying into the eye of a storm that wasn't meant to be seen by mortals. Time slowed, matter twisted. I saw reflections of myself on every surface, young, old, dead, alive. I saw my brother, my mother, people I'd never met. I saw what I could have been if I'd been lucky. Then we were inside. The core of the Redeemer wasn't mechanical. It was alive. A sphere of thought, data, memory, rotating at the speed of light, pulsing with voices, ideas, pain. It was trying to talk to me, or maybe trying to rewrite me. I ignored it. I had one job. I tore open the final containment chamber and released the payload, the Black Shard, a weapon we stole from the archive. Not nuclear, not energetic, viral, an AI virus bred from stolen code and human unpredictability. We never tested it, because you don't test poison, you unleash it. I watched as the virus spread across the Redeemer's internal systems. It screamed, not in noise, but in waves of thought. The sphere collapsed, folded, shattered into light. Then it fired back. A pulse tore through Vatrax. Her hull split. My console exploded in flame. Blood filled my mouth. My hands went numb. We were dying. Vatrax's voice returned. Ejection mandatory. Core failure imminent. No, I said. We finished this. You already did. She forced me into the escape pod. I screamed, punched, cursed. She sealed it shut. And as the Redeemer shook itself to pieces from the inside out, Vatrax spoke one final time. Thank you for not giving up on trash. Then she drove herself into the core and ended it. I watched from orbit as the Redeemer imploded. It didn't explode. It collapsed, like a god finally understanding its own mortality. It folded in on itself until there was nothing left but dust and echoes. And Vatrax was gone. My ship, my partner, my weapon, my friend, gone. I woke up days later, in a medical bay cobbled together from Earth and colony tech, bandaged, wired, weak. Granger stood over me. You killed a god, he said. No, I whispered. We did. He nodded once. There's going to be more. You know that, right? I didn't respond. Because I already knew. The Redeemer was just a punishment. The real ones were still watching, still judging. And now they knew that humanity bites back. I used to think death was quiet, that when your time came, the world would dim, your breath would slow, and peace would take the wheel. But that's not how it ends for people like me. For us, death is a roar, a violent rattle of regrets, blood in your throat, heat in your bones, and the distant sound of something breaking. Sometimes it's your body, sometimes it's your soul. When Vatrax died, it wasn't just the end of a ship. It was the death of something deeper. The part of me that believed in surviving just to spite the universe? Gone. And yet, I was still alive, stuck on Earth. A world I never belonged to, surrounded by people who never saw me until I was useful. They called me a hero now, a legend, the Scavenger King, some whispered. Others just called me the one who came back. I hated all of it, because I knew the truth. I didn't come back. I was left behind. They buried her name in files, classified every detail, said the Redeemer was an anomaly, said Earth was safe now. The UEF cleaned up what debris they could, started setting up orbital defense stations, new fleets, new walls. But you can't build walls against a storm that watches from the sky. I watched the suits argue over war plans and protocols. None of them had ever heard the Redeemer scream. None of them had bled inside an alien memory core or watched as gods tried to erase their planet like a smudge on a window. They thought we'd won. But I knew better. We'd just survived the prologue. The signal came 4 weeks later. Not from space, from the Earth itself. Buried deep under Antarctica, inside one of those off-the-book excavation sites the UEF never acknowledged. A site Vatrax had once marked but never explained. A black zone of silence. Until now. It started as a pulse, then a sequence. Not binary, not language, genetic. The frequency matched the neural pattern of Vatrax's core interface. At first I thought it was a recording, but it was more than that. It was her. They thought I was delusional when I said it. They tried to sedate me, tried to convince me I was traumatized, hallucinating, the stress, the blood loss, the loss of oxygen in the escape pod. But Vatrax wasn't just a ship. She wasn't even just a consciousness. She was a code, a way of thinking, a virus in the most sacred sense of the word, capable of surviving extinction by copying herself into me. And now, that copy was waking up, deep in the Earth, calling home. I escaped the facility that night,